Are you someone who worries about what to eat, or stress about the calories in food, or simply so confused about what to eat because you are so concerned whether it is healthy or not? If you are this person, this episode of Me and My Health Up is for you. To help you cut through the stress and enjoy food more, I'm your host, Anthony Harcher, a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. Our guest, Nina Kingsford-Smith, is also a clinical nutritionist. She specialises in disordered eating. Nina is back due to popular demand, and she's been on the show 3 times already. Episode 1, which we discussed disordered eating in more detail. Episode number 23, where we talked about body image. And episode 61, where we've just been answering lots of questions because of the previous episode has brought up so many curiosity, essentially, on the topic. So it's a hot topic, and hence I'm very excited to have Nina back. In this episode, Nina will continue to address the questions you asked. So without much further ado, here we have Nina Kingsford-Smith. How are you, Nina?
Hello, I am good. How are you?
Fantastic. So great to have you back. I always enjoy these discussions.
Yeah, I always love it. It's great to be back again.
And I think what I learn, it's really what I learn. It's, what I come away in terms of understanding, because this certainly wasn't taught in our degree, right? We didn't really do a lot.
Not at all.
It wasn't a subject, but it's something that you've tuned me into, which I think is just such a great approach to food, given all the misconceptions out there and all the stress around food. Food's such a source of nourishment.
Yeah, it really is, and it's sad. It gets so surrounded by so much confusion, anxiety, fear, stress, all the stuff. We get very narrow-minded when it comes to health, I think, and we get way too caught up and fixated on things. Yeah,
it's true. And it's really stressing to see someone like, if you're out, well, not that we can go out at the moment, but when you're out, with friends at dinner or about to order, and, people really just picking apart the menu, like it's
yeah.
I don't know whether that distresses you, but it's certainly I think poor person, like, why is it so difficult?
It's sad. It really is to see people struggling that much. Yeah, it's really sad, and it happens all too often. Really, it's just happening more and more.
Yeah, and like even when I go out to get some lunch, I might be queuing up and then watching the people order in front of me, just all the fussiness, and I'm just, I'm thinking, maybe it's because they're hung up on this because someone, wrote the gluten's bad, or, grains shouldn't be eating grains because they're non-paleo or whatever. Like I'm just seeing all this. I often wonder what's going on in their minds.
And there's honestly a reason to not eat absolutely every single ingredient there is, and every single food. There's going to be someone somewhere has said something about it that makes it bad for you or like unhealthy for you, and you can't win if you buy into it all. You just can't win. Like there's literally nothing you can eat. It's just ridiculous. Yeah,
and it's just so sad, given that it's so beautiful when you enjoy a meal that you really like. It's
yeah, and I feel like food is such a tricky one as well, because everybody eats, so everybody sort of considers themselves an expert on it. Where it's like, well, one person's personal experience does not extrapolate to the rest of the population. And then as well, it's not something that we can, we have to eat to survive. It's not something that you can just abstain from. Like you need to be able to find a way to be able to relate to it and have it in your life that's going to be enjoyable and sustainable for you, because you can't just avoid it. Like, yeah, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, I'm really keen to address this intuitive eating that you talk a lot about, and you share a lot on social media about. So please tell us more about intuitive eating.
Yeah. So I guess it's good to go back to where it sort of started from. It's like a philosophy or a framework that was started by 2 dietitians, Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich, back in, I think it was like around the mid-90s. they sort of developed this framework, and it's based on 10 different principles. But basically, it's all about tuning into your own body and yourself and your instincts and your intuition about what decisions you make around food. So rather than relying on those external factors, like we were just sort of saying, you know, reading somewhere that gluten's bad for you, or looking at the calorie content of food, or eating at certain times of the day, or any of that external knowledge, it's more so focusing on what's happening in your body. So that's going to be things like, you know, what does hunger feel like to you? What does fullness feel like to you? What foods do you enjoy? What foods don't you enjoy? What cravings are you experiencing and why are they going on? All of that stuff. But then it sort of also extends beyond that to rejecting. So like the first principle is reject the diet mentality. So stepping away from that really dieting mindset. It's about finding things that satisfy you and that you enjoy. Noticing and bringing awareness to the food rules that you might have. So, you know, I should eat this, I shouldn't eat that. Cutting certain food groups out of your diet for, like, you know, health reasons. So, you know, whether that's because you've heard somewhere that gluten's bad for you or something like that. And challenging those rules and, you know, questioning, are they true? Are they not true? Do they apply to me? All of that sort of stuff. And just generally, one of the other principles is this unconditional permission to eat all foods. So just allowing yourself more freedom and more space to experiment with food and enjoy food as well. And then, you know, I mean, like I said, there's 10 principles, so there's a lot to it. But the last one as well is about gentle nutrition. So that's when we bring in more of the nutrition aspect, but in a gentle way. So again, in a way I always say that's got to be enjoyable and realistic for you, but starting to consider, like, how can I make sure I'm fueling my body and supporting myself properly? And, you know, we can be doing that in relation to certain health goals as well. So, you know, when I say that, it might be making sure that your digestion is properly supported so that you've got less bloating or constipation, or, you know, supporting hormonal health if you've got painful periods, or, you know, whatever the case might be, supporting yourself through gentle nutrition in that aspect as well.
Yeah, I really love every principle you shared there. I know you didn't share the entire 10 principles. Is there principles that you find, you know, that you talk more to with your clients that, you know, that really is troubling people out there?
I think they're all really important. There are ones that definitely pop up more often, I suppose. I think challenging the food police, which is that one around food rules, is a really big one, because whether we realize it or not, I think pretty much all of us actually have these sorts of rules that we have around food. Really good indicators of that I find is should or shouldn't, or can or can't, when you're using that sort of language around food. But also definitely excluding any sorts of foods or food groups. Even if you notice yourself saying, okay, lunch has to be at 1, and if you eat lunch at 1 and then you're hungry again at 2, saying, oh no, I shouldn't be eating at 2, I shouldn't be hungry yet. And so you're ignoring that hunger because you're going by some sort of rule. So working through those rules is a very common one. We do a lot, we work through a lot with clients. But also the hunger and fullness, I think, is a really big one as well. And that's because I think we can become so disconnected from our bodies, again, because we're relying on all these external cues around food, that or just even busy in our day-to-day lives, that we completely ignore our hunger cues. And so helping people rediscover, what does hunger actually feel like to me? And then as well, how hungry do I get? So the different levels of hunger and the patterns we might notice with those. So you might notice that after a long day of work, you're much more hungry, or after a crappy sleep, or for women at certain times of their menstrual cycle and stuff like that. But I also think it's important to note there's a lot of the time intuitive eating can just become another diet in and of itself, because people sort of interpret it as the hunger fullness diet. I should only eat when I'm hungry and I should stop eating when I'm full. And so that becomes one that we need to be aware of, that we don't go down that road, because it's not about that. It's just about having the self-awareness of being able to recognize, when am I hungry, when am I not, and then making a decision because sometimes you get full, but you want to keep eating because you're enjoying it, right? Or you're in a social situation, and that's totally fine as well. But you've just got that level of self-awareness there to be able to understand your body and make those empowered decisions. So, yeah, I think those two are big ones for helping clients around, but really all of them, they're all important.
Yeah, I liked how you put it in context of the bigger picture. This when you said, only eat when you're hungry, and then because you can imagine like someone that's extremely stressed. Well, they're probably not hungry at all. So it needs to be put in context of the bigger picture, and so just on that, the thing that came to mind around that hunger and fullness is. The time restricted feeding, this intermittent fasting that's real fad at the moment. It's really taken off. You hear of so many people that are doing this intermittent fasting or a variation of it. And what are your thoughts on it?
I'm not a fan. I think it's another sort of diet sneaking its way in, because I think, yes, there might be some research that shows that it is beneficial for certain health aspects, which is great and all. But again, it's having that very narrow-minded view of health. We are humans. We're nice and complex. We're emotional beings. We're not robots that are nice little numbers on studies and stuff like that. That's, just blood pressure in and of itself, or just a certain health marker or blood test in and of itself. We've got lots of other stuff going on. So yeah, if we do intermittent fasting, it might help with X, Y, and Z on a physiological level. But what does it do to our stress levels if we've come to the time of day where we're saying, no, I'm done eating for the day because we're fasting? And that means that you miss out on a family dinner, or just sitting down to have a piece of chocolate with your partner at the end of a long day, and that's when you guys really connect, or any number of things. And that social aspect being so important to health as well. So I think it sort of bypasses all of that really important stuff. And then as well, again, it's getting you to completely disconnect from your hunger and fullness cues, because you might really hyper-focus on getting all your nutrients and energy intake within that eating period that you've given yourself. You might not necessarily be that hungry then, or that level of hunger then, but you're like, oh, crap, well, I've only got a few more hours left to eat. I better have a big meal now. And then again, on the flip side, you might be super hungry in the morning or in the evening, but it's in your fasting window, so you're not allowing yourself to eat. So I think it can become tricky there. I also think these sorts of diets and stuff, and this is very much stereotyping, but oftentimes it will be younger women or women in general who will be trying out these sorts of diets. And we really need to consider as well the differences physiologically between men and women in terms of hormones. So the impact that fasting has on our hormones as well, I think, is really, really important to consider, and how that can be really quite problematic for women and the female hormones.
Yeah, so you see it having a much bigger effect, or women that are doing this time restricted feeding as opposed to yeah,
and that's very, very stereotyping, but it tends to be what happens, that I notice in my practice anyway.
Yeah, it's certainly a fad at the moment. You just hear all these people that, and I totally hear you. Like, in that social situation where we can go out and have brunch back in those days. But like if you've been invited out with a group of friends to have brunch on a Sunday morning, well, what are you going to do? You just going to sit there and look at everyone eat food? Like, I'm just thinking, wow, Yeah, it really is, as you said, just another one of these fad diets. So, in terms of the non-diet approach, talking about diets, we're now going to get away from them and go dig deeper into the non-diet approach. So please share how that works.
Yeah. I mean, if I was to describe it, I'd use a lot of the same descriptions as I had for intuitive eating, because it's really about putting all of those principles into like a practical sense for clients. So, for example, if you were to come and see me or see a practitioner who practices from a non-diet approach, and you're wanting support with a specific health issue, it would be about, like, I'm not going to put you on a diet. I'm not going to create any meal plans for you or do any anything around calories at all, nothing like that. It's definitely about, like we were saying, with helping you become the expert of your own body. So helping you understand what's going to work for you. That might be, again, recognizing the hunger and fullness cues. It might be understanding what sort of cravings you get and why they happen, and figuring out patterns around that. It might be even just on a practical sense, what are your personal likes and dislikes when it comes to food, and how can we incorporate those, or, if it's dislikes, factor that aspect in as well when it comes to food choices and practicality and all that kind of stuff. And so oftentimes that is working around somebody's relationship with food, because that's why they would have come in, and really honouring that aspect of it. So those pulling a lot of those intuitive eating principles, pulling a lot of like mindful eating philosophies as well, and incorporating all of that. But then it could also be, like we were saying, around a specific health issue. So someone might come in and want support for, say, painful periods, and rather than me saying, okay, I'm going to put you on a raw vegan diet, or just a vegan diet, or gluten-free, or whatever it might be, it doesn't really matter, sugar-free, we're going to do it from a non-diet approach. So we're going to make sure that there's still room for all foods to fit. There's still room for joy around food. There's still room for social occasions around food. And we're just going to see, rather than focusing on like a scarcity mentality of what are we going to take out because it's bad for you, and that real sort of fear-mongering thing of, oh, your body's really fragile, or we've got to make sure that we eliminate all these things and stay away from them because they're big and bad and scary. It's more about, well, what can we include that's going to really support and nourish your body? What are some fun ways we can incorporate them? What are some practical ways that we can incorporate them, like maybe in terms of someone's someone's budget or time factors, or if they've got to cook for other people, and factoring in all that kind of stuff. So it's much more of that, abundance mentality of what's going to support you and help you in a realistic and enjoyable way.
You're really changing the paradigm of how people perceive a nutritionist or dietitian, because you think, often I hear people saying, I don't want to go and see a nutritionist or dietitian because they're going to take away all my loves, everything I love, and life's going to be so boring without it, and I really love how you're shifting that paradigm from that historical scarcity mentality around pulling things out of the diet and removing things, and really helping people to reconnect and build their relationship with food and enjoy it more. That's I think it's fantastic. So here's to a new era.
Exactly, yeah. And it's something I'm so passionate about. Like, it's really sad, the amount of clients that I've had who, because I'll often ask, have you seen a dietitian or a nutritionist or even a naturopath before? And the ones that have said yes, the amount of ones that have had negative experiences in those aspects, because they have had that sort of thing of they've been made to feel very at blame or guilty about the things that they eat, or like their health issues are their fault because of their eating habits, or, just being told just to eat carrot sticks and hummus with like no consideration of what the person actually enjoys, or like green smoothies, or, putting them on a detox or a diet plan. Like, it's a lot of experiences like that have just made the person roll their eyes and walk away and say, I'm never going to do that, and not actually getting any actual help. So it is sad. So yeah, I'm very passionate about reframing and redoing all that kind of stuff for the nutrition world. I think it's really important.
I actually think you should have an influence on all these colleges that are providing these nutritional education, and make sure they include a subject. Yeah.
That would be so good, actually. That would be amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be awesome.
Really important that, qualified dietitians and nutritionists actually come out with this new mindset. Because it's actually attractive. Like, if I'm thinking, someone that is considering making some changes, they're actually drawn to your approach. You got to be naturally drawn away from that. Going to take everything from me, and I won't be able to have my little bit of ice cream at night time. And
yeah, exactly. Well, it's much more appealing, right? Like, you want to enjoy life, and food's such a big part of that. So, like, having enjoyment around food is so important. So important. Yeah.
Totally. Just on this thing of, you've been touching on where people, are struggling essentially, and, where they may have some of these behaviours that aren't serving them. What is it, how do you approach and help them to get them to change that way of thinking, whether it be a rule or, I'm thinking about these people that are struggling and they really want to, take some action to help shift the paradigm around that rule or, please share how you work with clients in terms of getting.
I think 3 sort of key things that come to mind: self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-care. So self-awareness is the first most important thing, because we just need to have that increased level of awareness, right, of what's going on, so that we can understand ourselves better, understand our situation better, understand what is and isn't working for us and where we want to get to. So I think that's the first thing that I will work on with clients and help them increase that level of self-awareness and really build skills around that. The second is self-compassion, because, when you start to realize, have that increased level of self-awareness, it's very easy for that critical part of us to come in and say things like, oh, why am I doing that? I'm such an idiot for doing that. Why am I so hard on myself? And then you're hard on yourself for being hard on yourself. Or why am I such a failure because I can't stick to this, certain diet or way of eating or whatever. And there's that real harshness to it. And oftentimes when we've got that increased level of self-awareness, you sit with that for quite a while before having the ability or being ready to actually make the changes. And that can be a really tricky space to be in, because you know that whatever you're doing is not necessarily working for you anymore, but you don't have an alternate mechanism, or you're not ready to introduce something yet. And so you're in that real sticky point of, you're very aware of what you're doing currently is not helping you, but you're just not doing anything else yet. And so really having a level of self-compassion around that, being gentle with yourself, being patient with yourself, knowing that it's hard and being okay with that, and just knowing that it's not going to last forever. I think that is really, really important as well. And so we'll work a lot around sort of self-compassion exercises and approaches and little things you can do around that. And then the last one is self-care. So again, I think with health, we can get so hyper-focused on it, especially as nutritionists. It's all around food, it's all around nutrition, whereas we forget about all this other stuff that's going on in our lives: stress, sleep, all that kind of stuff. And something that sort of ties it all together is self-care. So basically, what can you do in your life? What do you enjoy doing in your life that brings you joy, helps make you feel relaxed, will help you release anger if you're feeling anger, or sadness if you're feeling sadness, or help you feel more nourished. And whatever those things are, really consciously building up that sort of self-care toolkit. And I'm sure we would have talked about this in some of our previous podcasts together, but building this metaphorical toolkit that you've got of all the things that can help you feel nourished and grounded and happy and cared for, and really work on that as well. Because throughout the whole process of what I do with my clients, as well as just life in general, that self-care stuff is really, really handy.
Yeah, I think we discussed it in the last episode, actually, episode 61. It's certainly, just on I'm curious about some self-compassion exercises.
Yeah.
Can you share some with us?
Yeah. I think is a really key one. I'll often just say to clients, how would you talk to a loved one or a little one in your life in this situation? And then apply that sort of language to yourself. So if you ate a large amount of food and you have a bit of a stomach ache afterwards, instead of berating yourself, being like, I'm such an idiot, why did I eat so much? Why couldn't I just stick to one serving size, yada, yada, yada. If it was a little kid or a child or a niece or a nephew or something like that, you'd probably say, oh, I'm sorry, honey, sorry you've got an upset tummy, it's okay, you'll feel better soon. Rub your tummy, maybe get a hot water bottle, maybe get a nice tea or something, and just sit and relax and rest. And do that for yourself and sort of use that language for yourself. For some people, a gentle touch can be really nice. So just a soft like rubbing your arm or something. For other people, that could be a little bit too much and a little bit intense and actually uncomfortable. So it doesn't work for everyone, but that can be nice. Another really good tip, and this is from a psychologist who I know, her name's Liz Kirby. She's fantastic. And this is a tip that she has given in the past, but even having a photo of yourself when you were little, so like maybe a 5-year-old you or a 10-year-old you, or whatever it might be, but talking to that version of you, so a younger version of you, and how would you have talked to them? So even if you keep that photo in your wallet or like next to your mirror or something like that, or just even a photo of it on your phone. These days we've always got our phones with us, so that can be handy. But that can really help you tap into that more gentle language of how to talk to yourself. There's a woman, the main person who does a whole bunch of stuff around self-compassion is Kristen Neff, and her website, I think it's just selfcompassion.org, self-compassion.org, I'm pretty sure. She has got a bunch of resources, including like different practices and stuff you can do around self-compassion. So she's got some really, really awesome stuff on her website, and she's even got a lot of research articles and stuff on self-compassion. It's a really good website for that too.
Fantastic. No, I really appreciate it. There's some excellent tips in terms of, how would you talk to a loved one or, your child? You'd certainly have a much different conversation than, that inner critic that you're constantly, I guess, criticizing yourself and, being hard and harsh.
Exactly. And I think like a big part of it as well of self-compassion is just acknowledging that it's a moment of suffering and like that it is hard, and you don't have to try and convince yourself that it's not, or that you're okay, or that to try and make yourself feel better, but just to sit with the fact that, this is crap and that's okay. And just to be able to sit with that as well, I think is important. Yeah.
Yeah, which is good because that's part of the healing process. Because if on the other end of the spectrum, if you deny that, then you got to start with that acceptance, and that's what that's what you recommend is accepting. That's the way you are feeling, and yes, it is crap. I feel that it's just what it is.
Yeah,
but
it's all part of the human experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You won't know what feeling good is unless you know what feeling crap is.
That's
it's all relative.
That's very true. It's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to, before we wrap up, just touch on body image, because that's also, causes lots of stress. And so I just wanted, just really hear you out as to your thoughts on this body image concern that young people have, and I guess that continues into adulthood, so it remains with us no matter how old we are, because we've picked up that conditioning from an early age. So please share your thoughts around body image and what someone can do to help that journey in terms of
I know we've done our previous chat on body image as well, so there's probably a lot in that podcast that we did, but I think one of the first things that comes to mind when we're talking about it now is like everybody's got a body. Everybody is going to relate to their body in some way, and everybody is going to be influenced by media, family, friends, the experiences they had in school when they were growing up. So many different things around how they relate to their body now. And I don't think there would be any single person on this planet who doesn't have some sort of aspect of body image that they have not struggled with in the past or currently struggling with. And, it's awesome now that there's this increasing movement around, it started as like body positivity, and there's much more increasing awareness around it and discourse around it. And what I think is really positive about that now is that it's actually shifting more into this body acceptance or body neutrality sort of framework. So instead of having to love your body all the time and think it's amazing all the time, because I don't think that's really realistic, and that puts a lot of pressure on people themselves, you sort of, again, feel like a failure in another sense of what's wrong with me? I can't love my body all the time. I don't always look at it and think it's awesome. And so that's a whole other lot of pressure in itself. but to just shift that towards body acceptance and body neutrality, and to acknowledge, yes, some days I'm going to have crappy body image days, and that's okay. But what can I do in that moment just to accept the situation a little bit more? So, for example, a really helpful thing, shifting from what do I love about my body in terms of physically how it looks to what do I appreciate about my body in terms of what it does for me. I love my hands because it means I can pat my dog. I love my arms because it means I can hug my friends. I love my tummy because it's what digests all my food and I get all my nutrients. Like, I love my skin because I can feel the sun on my skin. All these sorts of things that, it shifts our sort of perceptions around how we relate to our body and what it can do for us. So I think that's really, really helpful. Other tips around body image, I would say definitely look at what media you're exposed to. So a big one for us obviously is social media, and doing a bit of like a social media detox. The only sort of detox I will recommend, but literally going through your list of who you follow. Anybody where you find yourself comparing yourself to them, or you go off their page and you feel a little bit crappy for whatever reason, or you are saying, oh, I wish I had their legs, I wish I had her smile, I wish I ate what that person ate, any of that kind of stuff, unfollow them. If it's a friend or a family member and you feel like you can't unfollow them because it's going to cause some sort of tension, pretty sure you can mute, I don't know the term, mute them maybe, or something like that, so they don't pop up in your feed. So you can do that, and really just stepping away from all of that, and at the same time encouraging yourself to be exposed to a wider variety of body shapes, sizes, types, experiences, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not just talking about weight and that sort of thing. I'm talking about people from different cultures, different all sorts of different backgrounds, different abilities. So, all sorts of experiences of everybody has a body. So all sorts of lived experiences of that, whether that is like, there are some really awesome accounts now of people with colostomy bags, or who've had arms or legs amputated, or who have certain skin or autoimmune conditions. And so they physically look different to like a normal body. So having more exposure to all sorts of people, I think, is really, really awesome. But then even also in terms of social media, stepping away from just a focus on bodies or food in general to other things that you enjoy. So your whole feed's not just filled with all that kind of stuff, but random things, like it could be anything, cute dog accounts, travel accounts, whatever is going to like float your boat. It could be as niche as like knitting accounts, or jewelry making, or surfing, or gardening, or bees, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter, but having sorts of different things that you're exposed to, so your focus isn't always just around body and body image or food and that kind of stuff. You've got all this other lovely stuff around you. But yeah, I mean, media can extend to the sorts of books you read, the sorts of podcasts you listen to, TV shows you watch, music, all sorts of stuff. And again, it's the same idea. Step away from the stuff that makes you feel a little bit crappy and step towards the stuff that's going to be really supportive. Yeah. So I think, I mean, there's a lot around body image, but they're key ones.
Episode 23. Just, yeah, that was the one we did on. Yeah, absolutely. The last question from the listeners is around, I guess, binge eating, really. It's sort of people that have stuck in this cycle of binge eating and want to get back to not binge eating or binging on a particular food. And I think, it's probably stemmed a bit around the situation that we're in terms of the pandemic and being stuck at home. And so just in terms of, do you have any tips to help people relearn this more healthy moderation, or, you mentioned earlier getting in touch of your satiety, your feeling of satiety. So, what are your tips around this?
The big thing for me when it comes to binge eating or overeating is wherever there is some sort of overcompensation around food, somewhere before that there has been some sort of restriction. So whether that's a restriction in the obvious sense of not eating enough food in terms of having like a really minimal calorie intake, or again, cutting out certain food groups and sort of restricting in that way, or whether it's restriction in a much more subtle way. And this is sort of more called like mental restriction, where you've got those food rules in your head of I shouldn't eat this, I shouldn't eat that. Even if you are eating something, so say like chocolate, the whole time your thought process, I shouldn't be having this, I should stop. Like I'll have one more square and then I'll stop. That kind of thing. Wherever there's going to be any restriction like that, somewhere along the line, there's going to be overcompensation. Isabel Foxen-Duke, who is an American woman who does a lot around binge eating and emotional eating, she has this really fantastic analogy of a bow and an arrow. So if you think of restriction like the bow and you're pulling back on that and there's tension there, right? Like the more you pull back, the more tension there is. The longer you hold on for, the more tired your arm's going to get. But you can't hold on forever, right? Eventually you're going to have to let that go. And when you let that bow go, the arrow, which is the overeating, the overcompensation, the binging, is going to go flying in the other direction. And the more that, like the further you've pulled back on that bow, the further the arrow is going to fly. The more tension in that bow, the further the arrow is going to fly. And I think that's a really, really helpful analogy for people, because we blame ourselves so much for this sort of overeating, binge eating sort of thing. It's not your fault. It's how you're hardwired. It's how your body is hardwired. It's how your brain is hardwired to make sure that you survive. It's essentially all our body wants for us. It's its sole purpose is to make sure that you stay alive for as long as you can. And so if it senses in some sense that there is some sort of deprivation, it doesn't know the difference between voluntary deprivation like dieting or actual starvation and famine. It's got no idea. It's just going to sense that something weird's going on, and so it's going to enforce that sort of overeating, that overcompensation, that binging, to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I think, that can be really, really helpful. So I guess when it comes to helping clients with that, it's identifying where is that restriction, where are those restrictive tendencies, and working on that to bring that sort of, so that you're basically not experiencing either end of the spectrum of that restriction or of that binging, and you can come to a more nice middle ground. And I think with that middle ground, it's important to also know it's not some little thin line that we have to stay on. It's still this lovely big area with lots of room to like roam around in, but it's just so that you don't have that real sort of discomfort of one end of the spectrum or the other, but you've got this big sort of area in the middle that you can play with. Yeah.
I love that bow and arrow analogy. It's fantastic. And
it's so good. Yeah.
I was just relating it to our previous discussion on body image and around this, going from one extreme, which is the hating the body, and then all of a sudden body positivity. I love it. I love it. I love it. And then you said, no, that doesn't work either. You need to find that middle ground, so to speak. And you mentioned those tips around appreciation of the body, appreciating various parts of your body for what it does for you. And I thought that was fantastic. Just that bow and arrow metaphor for the binge eating, and then how it also ties in with body image in terms of this love, hate, and find the middle ground, where it's so just happy. Yeah, exactly. You're just happy, content,
Exactly. Yeah. That's really true.
So, really appreciate, all the wisdom you've continued to share with the listeners, and I'm sure they're very appreciative that you've addressed their questions about the previous episodes, or wanting more information. So you've certainly well and truly done that in this episode. How can the listeners best connect with you if they want further support?
Yeah, the best would be my Instagram. So that's Healthy Happenings with Nina. I'm from there, you'll see the blogs that I post and the recipes that I post, and you'll be able to pop onto my website that's got all of those blogs and recipes on there. And you can also from there get in contact with me. So whether that's via email or just DMing me on Instagram, and you can book appointments with me as well through that. So that's where I mainly hang out.
Great. I'll incorporate those links in the show notes, and so the listeners can go direct to your Instagram page or directly to your website or email you directly. Yeah, so thanks again. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it. I've learnt a lot, and I'm sure the listeners have. And for the listeners, I'm sure you've loved the episode as much as me. If you have, then please share it with others so that they can also get or be, I guess, marveled in the wisdom of Nina and be, I guess, continuing on their health journey in a way that's non-diet, it's more intuitive, and reconnect with their body so that it's love all around, love for the food, love for the body, and love for themselves. So, thanks again, listeners, and stay tuned for more insightful episodes of Me and My Health Up.